You're sitting in a room full of people laughing, and you're laughing too, but somewhere behind your eyes there's a tiny, quiet observer watching you laugh, noticing the muscles in your face, wondering if the laugh sounds natural, clocking the exact moment the joke landed and why. And then, just like that, you've mentally stepped outside of your own life and become the documentary filmmaker of it. Most people would call this overthinking, but it's not really that. It's something older, stranger, and honestly, a little more fascinating than that. Welcome to the psychology of people who are too aware. Now, here's what the average person assumes, that being highly self-aware is just a fancy way of saying you're anxious or maybe a little neurotic, or that you just need to relax and be present. And sure, sometimes that's part of the picture, but the research tells a much richer story. Because hyper-awareness isn't just an emotional quirk, it's actually a specific cognitive style, one that reshapes how you experience reality in ways that most people around you literally cannot perceive. Let me paint you a scene. You're having a perfectly ordinary conversation, maybe at a dinner table or in a work meeting, and while the other person is talking, you're doing something that would look from the outside like listening, but inside you're tracking the subtext of what they're saying. You're clocking the half-second pause before they answered your question. You're noticing that they laughed a little too quickly, which probably means they're uncomfortable, which means you probably pushed a little too hard back there, which means you should recalibrate. All of this is happening simultaneously, like 5 browser tabs open at the same time, and none of them are loading slowly. Psychologists actually have a term for this, metacognitive monitoring. It's your brain watching your brain. And in small doses, it's one of the most sophisticated mental tools a human being can have. It's what makes great therapists, great writers, great leaders. The problem, and here's where it gets interesting, is that for some people, this monitoring never switches off. There's a concept in neuroscience called the default mode network. It's the part of your brain that activates when you're not focused on a specific task. Most people, when they're not doing anything in particular, drift into daydreaming, a kind of pleasant, wandering mental noise. But highly self-aware people, their default mode network tends to loop back inward. Instead of drifting outward into fantasy, they drift inward into analysis. They're not daydreaming, they're debriefing. And that distinction matters more than it sounds, because it means that for these people, there is almost no such thing as downtime. Even rest becomes a kind of low-grade audit of the self. You replay conversations from 3 days ago, not because you're insecure, but because your brain is genuinely still processing them, cataloging what was said, what was meant, what could have gone differently. You don't just experience moments, you archive them. Now, here's the piece that most people miss, and I want you to sit with this for a second. Being too aware doesn't just affect how you see yourself, it changes how you experience other people. There's a 2018 study out of the University of Haifa that looked at what researchers called empathic accuracy, the ability to correctly read another person's emotional state. And what they found was striking. People who scored high on self-reflective awareness also showed significantly higher accuracy in reading emotional cues in others, not because they're psychic, but because they've spent so much time studying the landscape of internal experience, their own, that they've essentially become cartographers of it. And that map, it applies to other people too. Which explains something you might have noticed about yourself if this is resonating, the strange loneliness of being the person in the room who noticed something everyone else missed, the way you sometimes feel like you're watching a film slightly out of sync with the rest of the audience. It's not that you're more sensitive in a fragile way, it's that your resolution is higher. You're running at 4K in a 1080p world. But let's be honest about the cost of that, because I think you deserve that honesty. When your awareness is dialed that high, you become exquisitely attuned to contradiction, especially your own. You catch yourself performing emotions rather than feeling them. You notice the gap between who you are and who you're presenting yourself as. And that gap, even when it's tiny, can feel like a canyon. Psychologists call this self-discrepancy, and it's one of the more quietly painful experiences a person can have. Not dramatic, not loud, just this persistent low hum of, I'm not quite aligned with myself right now. And because you see it in yourself so clearly, you start seeing it everywhere. In the friend who says they're fine with a voice that says they're not. In the colleague who's enthusiastic in ways that feel one beat too forced. You become a collector of these micro-truths that nobody asked you to collect, and carrying them gets heavy. Here's what I find genuinely beautiful about this, though, and I say beautiful because I think it's true. This level of awareness, this relentless, sometimes exhausting, always running inner observatory is actually a feature that got miscalibrated by context. Because, evolutionarily speaking, hyper-awareness probably was an extraordinary advantage. The person who tracked subtle shifts in social dynamics, who read the room before the room knew it needed reading, that person survived. That person led. That person told the story afterward that kept the tribe together. The challenge today is that we live in a world that rewards constant output, constant performance, constant presence, and the hyper-aware person is often too busy processing reality to perform it on cue. They need more time, they need more quiet, they need conversations with depth, not just duration. And when the world doesn't accommodate that, they often conclude that something is wrong with them, when really the only thing that's wrong is that they're trying to run a Ferrari in bumper-to-bumper traffic. If this is you, if you've spent your whole life feeling like you're one step outside of experience, watching yourself have it, I want to offer you a reframe. Your awareness is not a burden you have to manage, it's a lens. And like any lens, it's about learning to look through it rather than at it. The goal isn't to become less aware, it's to become more at ease with the awareness, to let yourself be the observer without making the observer the only thing you are. Because here's the quiet truth that tends to get lost in all that inner analysis. You don't have to earn your presence. You're allowed to be in the moment without first understanding it. You're allowed to laugh without clocking the laugh. And every now and then, when you catch yourself stepping outside of your own life to document it, maybe just step back in. Trust that you'll remember enough. You always do. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this video, I'd genuinely love to know. Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who lives a little too much inside their own head, maybe send this their way. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can give someone is the words for something they've always felt but couldn't quite name. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.